Good evening, people of YouTube. It is me, Retro, and it's currently 6 in the morning because my drunk sister was talking in my ear for almost the entire night and the sun's about to rise. But I could not help but want to look at this replay that I have been meaning to analyze for a while. As in, like, I got this replay like 8 hours ago, and I'm finally able to get down here and analyze it. So, this was sent by, I don't know if I should keep them anonymous or not, but if yes, then I will just say whatever. I'll just bleep myself out here. But this was sent in by... So, he is driving Iketani's s13, or s13 I think it is, on Akina 2017. Why the old version, despite the fact the new one's out? Well, he couldn't find it at first. I linked it to him, but while he was practicing, I guess he drove the old one. So, I am going to analyze it, and I will both roast him and also provide actually useful commentary. At least I hope so, and God, the game's too loud. Alright, and also I apologize in advance if there's a lot of, like, fan noise in the background, because my room is really hot right now. And second of all, this is also being driven on a controller, so if the movements look goofy, that's why. So we're heading in. Also, I left the speed timer on, but that's fine. We're going into the first corner, and he is braking in pretty late, but you can see he kind of loses control a bit. So he goes into the corner, brakes at a fairly appropriate time, but he doesn't brake all the way, though this could just be because I haven't driven this personally, so maybe if he broke any harder, his brakes would lock. Now let's slow it down. So, we're in fourth gear. We're in fourth gear, topping at 153. I really wish I turned the timer off. I'm actually going to do that now. Okay, try that again. So, we're heading into first corner in fourth gear. We brake, downshift into third, pretty smoothly. And as we're coming in... Okay, this is the first part I see this wrong. Instead of staying on the brake, what happens is after he initially brakes, he brakes, downshifts, and then pretty much jumps off the brake and then gets back on it again when he really should have probably just stayed on the brake or simply braked later. And now what happens is, because we're already kind of coming in with the... You can see the car is kind of stepping out already. And then he jumps on the brake again after that. And it starts to make a bit of additional slide. So here, we brake, we jump off, and then we brake again. A bit too much, and we get too much oversteer. And now we start entering a slide. So there's a bit of countersteer. And then ultimately we lose some speed. And then at the exit we start to understeer a bit, as you can see. A bit of understeer going on, almost hit the guardrail in fact. And also our minimum speed drops to 78. Which, if taken right, this could probably be more like a 90 km/h corner, if taken the right way. So this is the first corner. Let's see it in third person. So we're coming in, turning into the corner, and then you see the traction starts to break a bit, and then we countersteer, almost instantly recover it, and then we instantly recover it. We enter a slide, and we pull the slide back out before we hit the apex. So the apex is somewhere like, let's see, it's probably around like here, right? Well, we're already here, and then we're trying to turn in, but we're kind of turning in a little bit early. And so if we early apex, then we'll have to turn even harder at the exit, which usually ends up understeering into the exit, the outside of the corner, into a guardrail. So what I would probably do here is I would probably delay braking instead of here, more like here maybe, and I would stay on the brake rather than jump off of it and then get back on it. I would make it one smooth application, and then I would lift off a bit and start turning in with low throttle, and then add a bit more on as I start nearing the end. Now, I'm not a professional Akina 2017 driver, and I have not driven Iketani's S13 much, so I can't really provide the best advice, but just from glancing at it, this is probably how I would change it. So that's the first corner. And now we're heading into the second one. Pretty good line. One issue I see with a lot of drivers is sometimes they will kind of stick to the middle of the road instead of going outside. He appears to be going outside. Not quite as far as he could be, but he's not like right here or something. So we're once again braking at around, let's say, 80% into third gear, which is a fine gear. We shift down into second, and let's see it in full speed. Taken pretty smoothly. Now, I feel like there's probably a bit more room. Like, I feel like you could have maybe taken that with a little bit more aggression. Because as you exit, there's still a lot of track width to use. Like, if you were to put the power down sooner, you might understeer a bit. But then you could go a bit quicker through the corner, exit it at a bit of a higher speed, and make use of that extra track. Now, if I take forever for every corner, this could take hours. But now we're going into the third corner. Braking right around this tree, I guess. Shortly before the sign. Now, here's something interesting. Look at the braking pressure. It's hard. And then it softens up a bit. And then it gets hard again. And then it shifts down into first. And then it jumps off pretty quickly. You can see that, let's see here. Got my mic kind of close to my face. So we're coming in, third gear. Brake, downshift to second. And then wait a bit, downshift back to first. Now what I might do is I might brake a bit later and brake to second and first really quickly. You can see that he brakes to second and then waits a bit before braking to first. Downshifting, I should say. I'm an idiot. And you can see the bit of a jerky steering motion because of the controller input. But it overall doesn't seem too bad. So the main thing is we're kind of getting a bit of an... We're kind of turning it a bit early. Like, I think that the way you should take this corner, looking at the shape of it, it's a really wide corner. So I would... You can see you're kind of turning it a little early here. Like, turn in like this, and then if you want to try an apex here, you're going to kind of go like this. Instead of... What I would do was I would wait a bit, and then I would kind of go like this. I believe the mouse is visible on the screen, isn't it? Yeah, it should be. So I would keep it outside for a bit and then start turning in. But he turns in early. And so he apexes it kind of too soon, and then you're going to greatly suffer on the exit. And what's worse about this is that this is one of the longest straights. So look at how long this is. This is a really long straight to be suffering through so much bad exit. Especially on the next hairpin, it's even more of a long straight. Even worse. And so now we're coming into this slight bend here. He's really on the inside. Uses most of the track width, could use a bit more. But generally, after this, you kind of try to shoot straight ahead. So shoot like this and then turn kind of like this. Maybe a bit more of a late apex. But let's take a look from a top head view. Yeah, we're coming in maybe a little bit early. Otherwise, I would say it's taken quite well, but could maybe be a little bit further outside, just a bit. But I think this is fine. Like, this is pretty acceptable. We have a slight bit of oversteer at the exit here. That'll slow us down minorly. Could use a bit more track width. And now this is one of the trickiest corners. So this one you need to kind of point almost toward the guardrail and trail brake a bit, which he seems to be doing, as you can see. As you can see, we're braking in around half throttle, half pressure, maybe 60%, downshifting from fourth to third, staying on the brakes, getting a bit of oversteer, downshifting to second, and returning to neutral. And then right as we really get in there, we lift off the brakes to kind of regain control. And then, ooh, oh, we get a bit of understeer here. Okay, here's a good example of... This is definitely from too high cornering speed and then jumping off the brakes. Right here, I would probably go in a little bit harder on the brakes to slow down a bit more. And right here, his biggest sin is jumping off the brakes right here. This kind of stops the weight transfer, puts a bit more weight on the back. And then when more weight comes to the back, there's less weight on the front, which means you can't turn as well. And especially in a heavier car like this, I don't know how heavy this is, but it's heavier than an 8.6. And an 8.6 already can have some bad understeer time to time. And even the S13 in real life is kind of known for understeering. You can see he turns all the way to like 180 degrees, and then he doesn't turn. You can see that. He starts to realize his mistake. He puts a bit of pressure on. He puts on too much. Now here's the thing. He puts on pressure, but he puts on, look at this, almost 80, like 80%. So his biggest sin here is what happens is because he puts on too much braking pressure. I think what happens, yeah, it looks like his brakes lock up a bit, and then because his brakes lock, he can't turn. Yeah, you can see the wheel kind of slows down a bit like it's locking up some. His brakes lock, he can't turn, and then he's barreling into the outside of the corner. So what you could do to avoid this is you'd want to brake a little bit, and then you also want to kind of drive a little bit over the grass. So typically, okay, so let's look at his line. His line, look at his line. His line misuses a lot of the track width. A lot of the track width. What you should do is you should take a line kind of like this. Go over the grass a little bit, and then you'll have a bit more room to get out of this exit. Because if you take the corner, hold on, if you take it more like this, you'll have to turn a bit harder to make sure you point the exit. But if you go over the grass a little bit, you won't have to turn quite as much and can get a faster exit and also avoid some understeer like we see right here. So once again, if you braked a little bit harder, or a bit earlier, if this is as hard as he can go, I haven't driven it myself so I wouldn't know, but if this is as hard as he can go, you could brake a little bit earlier to slow down a little bit more. And then also probably stay on the brakes here, still stay on them as you turn in, and don't jump off them, because then when you do, you start getting understeer, and then you'll panic when you get this, and you'll probably jump on the brakes too hard, and then when you jump on the brakes too hard, you lock, and then you will turn even less. So what you have to do is you have to stay calm. If you understeer, stay calm. Get on like 20, 30, 40% pressure, depends on the car. And then make sure you turn not too hard, because if you turn too hard, your tires will kind of skid along the road instead of turning with them. So make sure that when stuff like this happens, you want to be gentle with your braking, not jump on it too hard, but not completely jump off it either, because too hard you'll lock, and if you jump off it completely, then you won't get the effect of the weight transition, which means you won't get as much front grip, and so you'll understeer. That's about all I have to say for that. Bit of a crash there. So now we're coming into the second hairpin, and we're coming in with a lot of braking, and we get a, how should I put this? We get a slight bit of locking here. This is probably because he's close to 80% while he's turning. He's not turning a lot, but if you're turning, you probably want to not do any more than like 30 to 40, maybe 50. Depends on the car, depends on the tires, depends on the tire temperature, like how hot or cold it is outside. Depends if you're running the tire blankets or not. And then he kind of jumps off the brakes a little bit quickly. And also, I would say probably turns in maybe a bit too soon. Like, let's take a look at the line here. The thing about Akina's hairpins is that most of them need a late apex, because look at how wide these are. You kind of want to stay on the outside a bit and then turn in here, and then you'll get a way better exit, because exit speed on Akina is crucial. Because the amount, Akina, just imagine it like this. Akina is a hairpin and then a drag strip and another hairpin. So you want to sacrifice your hairpin speed if it means getting a better exit speed, because the exit speed is absolutely crucial driving Akina, because look at how long some of these straights can be. Look at how much the thing that makes Akina so hard to drive is because you have to master taking the hairpins just the right way to get the maximum exit speed to go as fast as possible in all these straightaways. Because you might take the corner almost the same, but the slightest difference could make up an entire second or two on the preceding straight when it is so long afterward. And when the entire course is made up after corner, long straight, You have to master taking the corners, because the slightest mistake in the corner will cost you big time when the very next thing is a super long, like 5+ second straightaway. Like, these straights can last as long as 10 seconds, 15 seconds, or however long. It can last a while. So you really want to turn in late apex it as much as you can. So here we are. We are turning in. I think there's not really any understeer per se. You don't really hear the tire squealing. So I think what happens here is a bit too much brake pressure. So I would probably, what I would do is I would brake a bit sooner. I would brake around here going straight to slow down for just a second. I'd like brake at 80%, then quickly jump to 40% and start turning to kind of make a slight drift, a slight slip angle to kind of sort of glide a bit through the corner and then straighten it out right around here and then power ahead. Kind of what I would do. And now this is one of the minor corners. Okay, that was not necessary. Okay, so here you want to be really far outside and you want to kind of do this. Going straight ahead. You want to, I mean, you might brake for this slightly, but in some cars you can plow straight ahead. So I think the main thing is, notice how long it takes. This is a mistake I see with a lot of drivers. Just someone I watched recently who asked me for tips, I noticed this mistake a bit with them too. Watch how long it takes before he gets on the brakes. Look at how long it takes before he gets on the brakes. There's like almost a whole... How much time is that? Let's take a look. Let's see how long that is. It's almost a half second when that should be almost instantaneous. When you want to brake for a corner like this, you want to jump off the gas and brake as quickly as you can. You don't want to jump off the gas, wait like half a second, then brake. You want to jump off gas and immediately brake, heel toe downshift. And another thing, notice that when he downshifts here, or actually it's an upshift, I'm sorry, which is even weirder because he brakes and then upshifts. There's never really an incident where you want to brake and then upshift. If you're ever braking, you want to downshift with it or just stay in your current gear. Why would you brake and then upshift? Because you brake, slow down, and when you upshift, because you slow down, you'll upshift into a low RPM, and then at that low RPM, you're below your peak torque band. So a car with, I don't know, this is around 7,500 RPM, I guess. The 8.6 has like 7,800, and the torque band peak is like 52. So there's a specific rule to shifting I have. I don't know if this is really true, but it's one I've always followed. What you want to do is you want to find the exact point where the car accelerates the fastest, and you want to shift in a way so that when you shift and the RPM resets, it goes to that exact area. So if the peak torque is 5,200, then when I shift from third to fourth, I want it to be at 5,200 when I shift up. So right here, look. He's in third gear, shifts up, and then when the RPM resets, it's around 5,200. So if you shift up and you're way past that RPM, you could probably shift up sooner. Or if you shift up and you're beneath it, you want to delay your shift as long as possible. So for an instance, when I'm driving the 8.6, the IDP first, the first stage 8.6, when I drive it, I shift at the first gear to second at the latest RPM I can. Then I shift up a little bit earlier, and then a little bit earlier, and by the time I'm at fourth gear, I'm shifting from 7,000. So if I'm in third gear, shifting into fourth, I shifted only 7,000, when at first gear I would shift to 7,800,000 from first to second. That way I'm always hitting my peak torque RPM as I shift up. This is going to be such a long video. So what I would probably do here is another thing. He turns while braking. This is a sin. So this is probably something most people know already, but wheels have a limited amount of grip. So if you are braking, you're using up part of that grip, and when you turn, you also use part of that grip. So basically, imagine a scale, or imagine a balancer, a seesaw. If you're trying to turn, the seesaw is going to tip to the left. If you try to brake, it's going to tip to the right. If both sides are tipping too far, the seesaw is going to break in half at the middle. So either you get understeer, or you get tires locking. Usually both. You'll get tires locking and then understeer immediately after. Maybe oversteer if you get lucky/unlucky. So what happens here is he kind of goes into it too hot. You can see that he totally misses the apex completely. You'd probably want to brake a little bit earlier, just lift off a little. Because sometimes you don't need to brake for a corner, you can just lift off and you'll get enough weight transfer and a bit of speed slowdown from not being actively on the accelerator to make the turn. And then you lift off a bit, get into the apex, you want to point the car toward the apex, and then once it's pointed there, you hit down on the throttle as much as you can without making it over or understeer. So I would probably brake a little bit sooner, or even just lift off a bit, turn in a bit sooner. That way I could hit the apex. Because then what happens when you miss the apex like that is another thing. Not just losing corner speed. When you go so far outside, you have to turn a lot further to get on the outside the next corner. So what happens is when you turn this corner, you don't just want to turn the corner, hold on, like this. You want to kind of turn it like this, because then you'll be already set up for the next corner, which has an even longer straight set. When you do this, you can already be in position for the next apex. And then you'll be able to hit this next straightaway even quicker. So look at this. Because he takes so much time to fix his position, takes so long to get to the next outside, he's unable to be able to turn into that apex right there because it takes too long to get in position, and so he understeers. And not only that, he doesn't even brake, which means he won't get as much weight transfer, less steering, and you kind of understeer out of the corner a bit. And at this speed, you could possibly even shift down to second, then real quick back up to third, just maybe. So you kind of understeer a bit, not braking at all, you miss the corner apex, and then you start plowing toward the outside, you hit the gas a bit. So at this point, it's like, okay, I'm facing the apex. You hit the gas, but it's like, oh no, I start to understeer even harder, and then you want to instantly get back off the gas, because it's like, oh no, I'm understeering, I gotta stop the understeer, so you get off the gas. And then as you do that, you slow yourself down even more, and then you kind of just like whirl around the corner, so to speak. So now, next up we have, this is one of the hardest corners ever. Like, this is honestly one of the hardest corners for whatever reason, especially on the new version. I've always hated this corner in particular. This was a corner that I could never truly understand, but this is one of the probably most difficult corners in all of Akina. It's this really tight right-hander that leads to a very long straight, another one. And it's always been a bit difficult to understand exactly how to take the line. So let's see how he does it. Brakes pretty well, downshifts, and then a slight bit of locking, because you see again, he's braking it straight, but he doesn't really lift off the pressure. In fact, actually bobs around slightly. You can see it goes up a teeny bit as he starts to turn. Right when you turn, you lift off the brake. So basically, imagine that there's a string attached to your brake pedal. As you turn the wheel, it pulls the brake pedal forward, and therefore less pressure. Again, it's basically like a scale. The more you turn, the less you want to brake, and the more you brake, the less you want to turn, or your wheels run out of grip, your tires, and then you wear them down unnecessarily. I think it may raise their temperatures more than you might want them to be. I'm not sure about that. I haven't learned every single thing about tires. And it will also make them skip over the ground, lose the contact patch, and then you start plowing forward rather than turning the way you want to. So you can see that he kind of goes in, because he locks, he kind of is unable to get on the gas as soon as possible. Like, I feel like you could probably turn a bit more and then get on full throttle sooner. Like, I'd probably turn a bit more, get closer to the guardrail, and then hit the full throttle a bit sooner than that. You can see he's almost facing the corner exit. Like, by now I'd be hitting full throttle, but you can see there's a slight delay before he does. Really minor thing, but it could make a difference when it's such a long straightaway. This is another somewhat difficult corner. We have a lot of brake locking issue here. So, braking at like 90%, that might just be the limit of the car, especially if the ABS is turned off. Some of these cars have built-in ABS. This is not necessarily a sin of mine, but if the cars have built-in ABS, like if you turn on factory ABS in the settings and there's ABS on the car, I will use it. So, if the aid comes in there, unless it's TCS, I will use it because ABS can actually help you somewhat. And when the car is designed around ABS, not using it can make it very difficult. Like the FD, at least some of the ones I've used have ABS built in, and when I've tried turning that off, I can brake at like 20-30% going perfectly straight, and I lock the tires. I barely touch the brakes at all, and I lock them, simply because the car is designed around ABS. So trying to brake without ABS on an ABS-oriented car can sometimes not work very well, and it can actually kind of slow you down a bit because you're being so hesitant with the brakes. And this is another thing. This is actually kind of explained in Initial D. It is car power and balance. So more power does not make you faster. It is balance. More handling doesn't make you faster. More power doesn't make you faster. The number one thing you want in your car is to be able to trust that car.
The straight truth is that sometimes a car has too much power to be very effective. Turbo's great on the straightaways, but when you're coming out of the corners, it can seriously hinder the car's behavior, and like a double-edged sword, it can cut you just as easily as it does your enemies. The s13, on the other hand, gets faster once it's hit its stride. When the straightaways are shorter, the more powerful car doesn't always have the advantage. Sometimes it just boils down to whoever's more aggressive.
You want to have a car where you know that it's going to listen to what you want it to do. When you can put faith in your car that it's going to do what you want it to do, that is how you hit the top speeds. That is how you drive amazing laps, is when you have the car set up in just the right way, or your reflexes and driving sense is tuned in just the right way, that you know this is going to make me lock, this is going to make me oversteer, this is going to make me understeer. When you know all these things, you know how to avoid them and how to initiate them when they're necessary, like a slight bit of oversteer. If necessary, you know how to initiate that and how to control it and how to keep your car listening to you. This is how I've driven my fastest laps. Every lap I've ever done that I consider good is when the car would do exactly what I tell it to do. Maybe with a little bit of resistance to me, like in my Gunsai lap, my 224, the car fights me a little bit in one of the corners, but other than that, it almost always listens to what I'm wanting it to do. And if it comes out of left field, something I don't want to happen happens, I already know how to correct it, and I can correct it immediately. And even if it does come out of left field, I usually always am kind of expecting it to, because when you drive on the limits, you're kind of always expecting something bad to happen and hoping it doesn't, because you're driving so hard that you'll kind of think in the back of your mind at any moment it could go wrong. You don't want to believe it, but you also think it could go wrong because I'm driving so fast and so aggressive. The slightest mistake could kill me, and usually it does. Which is why great laps can take thousands, tens of thousands of attempts, hundreds, maybe even thousands of hours to get, because you have to drive those limits absolutely perfectly. The slightest miscalculation, it's over. Either you slow down a lot, or you completely total the run. So let's see what we have here. I'm sorry if this video is like really long, but I'm having a lot of fun analyzing it. All I really want to do is help more people reach their potential, go fast, and enjoy driving, because driving is something to be enjoyed. And this is the kind of thing, do you ever have something where it's like you're only having fun if you're good at it? This driving is the epitome of only fun if you're good at it, because if you suck at driving, it is boring, it is frustrating, it is tiresome. But when you're good at it, it is the funnest thing you can do. When you can drive a car really well, it is extremely satisfying and incredibly gratifying and satisfying to drive that car so well, really pushing your limits but not crashing. It's one of the most gratifying things you can do, and it's part of why I put so much time on driving, because the more and more I get good at it, the more fun I know I'll have. Sometimes it can be frustrating, but it still ultimately ends up being fun when you pull off that god lap, or you just raise your average from 459 to 458. So all I really want to do is help more people reach that potential. And if you say, I want to do 520, I want to do 510, I want to do 505, I want to do 5-minute flat, I want to help you be able to do that by pointing out your flaws, telling you how to correct them, and just trying to get you to retrain your reflexes and correct your muscle memory to help avoid this kind of thing. As well as how to tune the car to tune out certain diswanted things. So if, for instance, your brakes are locking, you could maybe adjust the brake balance a bit, you could reduce the brake power a bit, you could run in warmer conditions, because if you run in like 0 degrees Celsius, your tires will be colder. And tires colder means they don't have as much grip because they're not as warmed up and stick to the road as well. I don't know exactly why, but you have less grip without more heat. So if you want more heat, you can, I believe, you lower tire pressure to make more heat. So if you want to have a bit more grip and less responsiveness, you can lower pressure, or the opposite if you raise pressure. Tire pressures can make a massive difference, especially when you use tire blankets and change the pressures as well. It can make a big difference. But enough talking. Let's analyze the next corner. So first thing I see wrong here is the line. I would probably try to get a little bit further outside. And then the brake pressure locks a little bit. He's staying totally straight though, so this must just be the car's limit of brake pressure. I would just have to brake slightly. When you lock up like this, you want to brake slightly earlier and slightly less gentle. Slightly more gentle. Less hard. And so we come in, and then we're on a course to kind of start getting in there, but then he gets on the gas. So it almost looks like if he didn't get on the gas, he might be able to make the corner. But what happens is he gets off the brake, gets on the gas just a little bit, and then gets back on the brake again and downshifts mid-corner. Okay, this is interesting. How do I describe this? The first thing he did wrong mainly, besides the wrong line and too much brake pressure, was that he hits the gas a bit. This puts the weight back on the rear and off the front, and you get understeer. Not to mention the brakes locking a bit delayed his turn in until the brakes unlocked. When he got off the brakes and they unlocked it, you'll see that once the brakes come off, once he comes off the brakes, so look, he's turning, and then it's not moving. It's barely moving. But then once his brake pressure lets up, then it starts to turn more. But then he hits the gas, and then it kind of makes it stop turning more because he hits the gas. And then he downshifts to first mid-corner, which isn't the worst idea. I mean, you could probably take that in first gear. I don't really know. I'm not an akina professional. I'm sorry, I'm not professional. At least on 2017, even on PK, I'm not that professional. But kind of, I would probably. Okay, so here's what went wrong here. He's accelerating. It seems fine. Then he shifts up into second and accelerates more. But at this point, he's in. Okay, so here's what happens. You're in the peak RPM, so you get a slight bit of extra turning potential, because when you're in peak RPM, your wheels have more torque, and so they'll kind of push the car more. But once he shifts into second, he goes beneath his torque band, which is probably around 5,000, at 4,000. And then when he starts to accelerate, it makes more understeer than it makes oversteer. So if he had just waited a little bit longer to shift into second here, he probably would have made the corner, and then he would have been able to shift into second a bit later, and then face the exit, and then put the power down, making the corner. Oh, this one's good. This one seems good. Okay, so here's what I like to describe my driving technique as. This slight oversteer. So look, you can hear the tires squeal. The car almost looks like it's gliding around the turn, but the wheels aren't being countersteered, and he's not turning in really hard either. Like, he's only turning in a little bit. Now let's look at what he does. So he brakes a bit, downshifts to second, and then turns, kind of brakes a little bit too hard, then jumps off of it. Probably too fast. But it ultimately makes that slight bit of oversteer. This slight bit of oversteer is what I would call slip angle. Maybe not everyone would consider that slip angle, but a slight bit of oversteer. And you can see that his cornering speed looks better than the rest of the corners. Like, it looks like he's turning the corner faster. So what happens here now is that he's hitting the gas, but he's not in peak RPM. And it makes him kind of understeer a bit, and it also probably would have helped if he just turned the wheel a bit more. If he had maybe waited a bit longer, or maybe even shift into first at this point, like shift into first like right around here, it would turn a bit more. He'd kind of go off the road into this little gutter, and then he would kind of switch to second around here, and then he'd power out around there. And then you'd get a way, way better exit speed, because look at the way he takes this. Instead of being around the inside here, like, let's look at it from the top. So he takes the line like this. He drifts in initially, like it looks like he's gonna make it, but then he starts to go further outside instead of staying inside. And then, let's see, so he does like this, kind of outside. What he should have done was more like this. Maybe not like that, but like this. Like that. But instead, he kind of understeers to the outside just before the apex, and then kind of understeers, tires squeal, hits the gas really late because he has to correct his angle. You can't full throttle out until you're actually facing the exit, obviously. So you want to keep the inside apex, face the exit sooner, and then hit the gas sooner. Go faster. And now this is one of the other tricky parts, especially on PK where there's a bit of elevation change and bumps and stuff. This is the ice rink, I think is what they call it. So let's see how he takes it. Ooh, that was bad. That was really bad. Okay, so let's analyze what went wrong here. So the first thing is he misuses the road a bit. I would probably go a little bit further out here. And then now what goes wrong is he brakes really hard. Okay, he brakes really hard. So let's look at this more closely. Comes in, lifts off a bit, brakes really hard, and then it makes him oversteer because he's putting front weight on and at really high speed, and the tires probably just can't grip going that fast. So what needs to happen is at this point he could probably just lift off a bit, maybe even stay on full throttle, and kind of, you might feel a slight bit of oversteer, but you'll just want to fight that and stay on track. Because what went wrong here was he oversteered too much and then corrected it and then couldn't correct it all the way. And now you'll see another thing. When you get bad oversteer, you might want to just jump on the brakes to try and stop yourself. This only makes it worse because what happens is when you do this, you'll lock the tires and then your tires aren't going to turn. You're not going to turn anymore. What I would have probably done, okay, so let's say that I made this corner wrong, which I probably wouldn't have, but let's say I do, and I oversteer like this. First thing is, as he starts to oversteer, he doesn't countersteer right away. As soon as you feel it, you want to start countersteering a bit. Like if you had countersteered by now, like let's say probably maybe this much countersteer, but here, or here even, you probably could have saved it. So he gets off the gas. Okay, so let's break it down bit by bit. He gets off the brakes here. He brakes too hard, starts oversteering, gets off the brakes, That puts his grip back on the back, which is a good thing. That's a good thing. And he accelerates, which puts more grip on the back, which is another good thing. But then he gets off the gas. If he had maybe stayed on the gas the whole time, he might have been able to save it. He goes from fourth into third. If he had just stayed in fourth and jumped on the gas, or went in third and then got on the gas sooner, he might have been able to save this. But this was a pretty bad crash. Not crash, but oversteer problem. There are some times where even I cannot save things like this, and I would say you can't save it, you just have to not even get in the situation. Like sometimes these things can be either impossible to save, or maybe they are, but they're just so difficult no one could really realistically save that without it just being blind luck. So in this situation, don't do this and try to recover it. Just don't get into the situation in the first place. Like, just don't even let this happen to begin with, because pulling this back around is no mean feat. Even I would probably struggle to pull this back around if it got this far into the slide. Like, by now, this is savable, this is savable, this is savable, this is savable, this is starting to get difficult. This is getting difficult, this is getting difficult. This is getting difficult, and by now, it's almost impossible to pull it back around, because even if you manage to pull it back around by now, because of the inertia, if you pull it back around right now, the instant you do, you'll probably just start flinging back the other direction. You'll have a pendulum effect. You'll do it, pull around, and then just swing this way and crash into the wall that way. So unless you can, basically, what you can do is right here, let's say right around here, hold on, I did that wrong. Right around here, I start facing forward. As soon as I face forward, I need to go from all the way like this to front facing, and maybe even a little bit to the right as well, and jump on full throttle basically immediately, and hope that I'll get enough rear grip and not end up penduluming into just, you know, vang, like almost like an inertia drift, but into a wall instead of through a corner. So what I would do here is I would not brake as much, get off the brakes sooner, and then get back on the gas sooner. Or maybe even just lift off a bit instead of braking, or maybe even full throttle. Sometimes, to understand the limit, you have to push over it, and then push a bit less over it till you realize, okay, this is the maximum. This is as far as I can push it. But ultimately recovers it pretty well. And now this is one of the trickiest corners. This is a super long corner. So look at how long this corner is. This has always been probably the hardest corner on Akina for me, because you need to kind of double apex. Like this, sort of. It's a very difficult corner. Like, this is a corner that you could probably four-wheel drift through if you do it just right. Like, I've seen it done. It's extremely difficult corner. Very technical, very complicated corner. So I'm very interested in seeing how he's going to do this. So let's find out. Brakes in early. Doesn't hit the gutter. Kind of double apexes. Okay, he's on the right track. He's kind of on the right track. He's actually on the right track. He doesn't hug. Okay, so the biggest issue I see people do is they usually will hug the corner all the way. So instead of doing like this, or let's say like this, they'll just do this. They'll hug the corner all the way around, and then you lose so much speed. Because the problem is, if you do that, you will not be able to apex this properly. You want to take it so that you can kind of go like this, and then apex it right around here to get the best exit speed. So looking at his line from up ahead, he almost does that. But he probably should have gone a little bit further outside, and then apexed it a little bit later. Because you can see, because he apexes it early, he's not facing the exit yet, and he has to turn further to face the exit, and then because he turns more, he loses more speed, and his exit speed suffers. Alright, so now this is another really hard part. This is the technical section, very difficult. You'll want to, I still don't really truly understand how to take this properly. Like, it's even harder to take than the technical section on PK Akina, because it's just more convoluted. Because it's longer and the corner shapes are kind of weird. So, this, I would probably kind of stay outside a bit and then apex. I don't even really know, honestly, how to take this corner, because it almost looks like maybe a double apex, like kind of like this. But this is a corner I've never really understood how to properly take. It kind of confuses me. So I would go outside through here and then do this, apex here, and then you'll want to apex and then kind of just, I guess, stay around the middle of the road probably. And then there's a slight bend, and it tightens up a bit, and then there's another one, and it just goes on and on and on. It's a really long, difficult section that I could never quite tame when I used to drive 2017, before I switched to PK Akina and literally never looked back. I haven't touched this thing in forever. So going at it like this, and then you kind of just do that, I suppose. I don't know how to take it. And then we've got this bend here, which is fine, but then he starts, okay, so here's what's going wrong. He keeps turning when he probably should have been straight by now, and now look at this. So he's in his peak torque band, almost full throttle. What happens? He oversteers. He power oversteers because he's turning full throttle in the torque band, and it makes oversteer because he's turning too much. Tires lose their grip because there's too much torque going to the back, and he's in that torque band, and so oversteer, correction, and ultimately time loss because of that correction, wasting time correcting it. So what we need to happen is we need to stop turning, like by now, like right now. Start turning, stop turning, by now, stop turning, you're facing the corner, but you're still turning. So just stop turning like right here. And then after you stop turning, like let's take a look at it. So we're basically facing the corner. If I start going right ahead, I'll hit the gutter a little bit. But if I turn just a bit more, like stop turning like maybe here, right before the oversteer, and I go straight ahead, I'll dip in the gutter, and then I can take the corner. But he's on the right track, because he probably could have stayed outside a bit longer. Like he could have stayed out here, and then did an apex like here, or even later. But he needed to kind of lift off a slight bit to stop that power oversteer. Or even just stayed outside further so he didn't have to turn quite as much to take the corner. And then you would have, I don't know, kind of gone like this, I guess. Like I said, I never really truly understood how to take this perfectly. But I would say like this, something like that maybe. So like that, and then like that, and like that, and that, I guess. Probably like that. But he oversteers, corrects it, mainly because too much throttle. Brakes a bit here. He isn't facing quite perfectly straight when he brakes, and so he gets a bit of that way transition, a bit of oversteer because of that. Not too bad, corrects it pretty much instantly, almost instantly, so not a big time loss from that. Maybe half a second, I don't know. I'm not very good at gauging time losses. I always underestimate how much difference they actually make. His line seems fairly good. He locks a little bit here, but he's going almost totally straight, and he's not even hitting like 80%. He's braking like maybe 60. So this might just be a patch of road that has bad grip. So there's a rule with the pavement. You can't always brake at full pressure everywhere, because sometimes there can be slight bumps, or like the pavement can be a bit uneven. And so what you want to do is you want to memorize every location where you have to lift off a bit on the brakes or you lock. And so it's like, okay, this is the point where I need to brake at 40 instead of 60. And then you'll want to memorize that. That way you don't end up locking here every time, braking at your standard pressure. There's a little, looks like he's hesitating a bit, probably because if you hit the gas too much, you'll understeer. And this is mainly because he's apexing it early. So let's look at this corner. Yeah, this might be another double apex. I don't know. That pavement looks kind of weird. So you can see just how long this corner is. So going at it like, I don't know, like this. Apex here, and then kind of go outside, apex again, or maybe stay outside a bit and then kind of apex it here and then go like that. Probably the best idea. So he's inside when he should be outside, and then inside around here, or maybe here, something like that. But he apexes it a bit too soon, and then has to turn more to correct his angle, his direction, and then loses speed, because you have to turn more and then you can't hit the gas as soon, and then your exit speed suffers. Ooh, this doesn't look too bad. Well, I take it back. It looked like he was going into it correctly. Like, okay, let's look at this. He brakes a lot. So, third gear, let's look. Brake, downshift to second, and then starts turning, downshifts to first, and lifts off the brakes a bit, lifts off it a bit more. And then right as he starts to drift a bit, then he gets off the brakes completely. This is pretty much the correct formula. Just about, but he goes into it a little bit early. And because of that, he kind of goes into the grass. If he had maybe delayed his braking slightly, he would have probably just did that again, but on the road instead. Maybe kind of delay it a bit and take a later apex, because Akina really wants you to late apex. Like, it really, really wants you to late apex. So if you braked even later, maybe like, I don't know, here, and then you kind of did that drift, it might go like this. Maybe stay in second gear because it's a bit of a long corner. I'm not sure. Especially because this is like the longest straight or second longest. I don't know if this one's the longest or the one at the very end. But, line here looks good. He's sticking to the inside. He lifts off slightly. Maybe he could avoid that if he just took a bit of a different line. Like maybe turned in a little bit later. Could maybe have avoided that. And then we're going in here, shifts up to fourth, alright. slight liftoff, could probably have just kept going, maybe understeered a bit, but would have still probably not hit the guardrail and stayed on full gas. And that slight bit of oversteer. So if you just lift off and still oversteer, what you want to do is just lift off like maybe halfway instead. So you still get a bit of that weight transition, but not so much that you end up oversteering. And then, okay, so he probably should have aimed more for this and then went straight ahead. He kind of does that, and then he has to turn a bit, and then your speed will kind of suffer going through there. You want to be really facing straight rather than turning, or maybe just like slightly turning, but not this much. And then he kind of understeers a lot, and then you go into this corner like way inside when you should be outside. We get a slight kind of four-wheel drift here. Almost cool, actually. That was almost cool. Yeah, you get a kind of four-wheel drift if you look at this. Not bad. Alright. Something that I think is cool. Yeah, I know, crazy, right? So, again, mainly the line, I would turn it a bit earlier, or just turn in harder maybe even lift off a little bit to make sure I definitely hit that. You want to make sure that you stick to the line no matter what. Like, even if you have to slow down a bit, just stick to the line, because ultimately you will probably be faster if you just stick to the line instead of trying to push yourself harder and then understeer out of it. Because then if you understeer out of it, it could have lasting repercussions, because it might carry into the next corner and then you lose speed in that corner too, or you lose speed in an exit, and it can just make a world of problems if you let that happen. So, yeah, so let's look at this. If he were going like this, he'd be facing basically straight, and then he'd be going in and could probably kind of hug the wall a bit. Like, you might understeer a bit, but just fight it and make sure you stay there. And then when you're at that point, you can pretty much start turning straight almost. And then you'll turn straight, turn slightly here, and then you'll kind of apex it there. But what happens here is he slides outside, has to correct himself, and then he misses the apex, just flies on the outside, like glides just past it. And then because of that, he loses his speed, and also because that oversteer, he has to correct it. It loses him time. And also, it ends up offsetting him. Instead of kind of going like straight through here, like this, it kind of offsets him a little bit too far to the outside. And then he misses the apex again. Instead of being right by this guardrail, he kind of undershoots it a bit, and then has to turn a bit more for the next corner, rather than going like perfectly straight. So if you get really close to this guardrail, you can practically go just straight ahead on this next one. And it saves you a bit of turning, and therefore saves a bit of speed. And now this one, let's see if he, oh, well, never mind. I was gonna say if he sticks to the inside or outside, but he ends up braking a bit too late, probably needs to brake sooner. He's going in at 132, just before the corner, and unlike Takami's 8.6 where you can like go from 4th to 2nd at top RPM, and end up coming out fine. Like, Takami's 8.6, you can brake ridiculously hard with that thing, but this car I don't think is as aggressive. I've driven a little bit of Iketani's car. I've driven his car a little bit, but I don't think it can handle that aggressive braking. Like, if this was Takami's 8.6, you could have probably pulled this out, but I don't think Iketani's car can do it. You have to brake earlier for that, or brake harder, but it looks like he's already kind of locking a little bit. Well, maybe not. I mean, he could have maybe broke a bit harder, but he's probably near the limits. And then you get understeer. The real issue is that he went in too fast. Like, if he were going slower, he probably would have ended up sticking around the inside and making the turn. But he's going in too fast, and then his tires just kind of glide out and skid to the outside. So even if you can make the car face the right direction, your tires may just glide along and skid outside the turn. And then you eat the guardrail. So the issue here was the fact that he went in too fast. That was the biggest thing, because if he went in a bit slower, with the way he's turning, it's almost like the four-wheel drift slip angle thing. You can kind of see it if you've got that keen eye for it. You can kind of see that bit of slip angle going into it, or just four-wheel drift. I don't know if I'm really saying it right, but you can kind of see it. But he ends up going in too fast and skids out to the outside, and then eats the guardrail. Oh, and it doesn't look like he uses the full width, so this is something that a lot of people do, and I used to do it myself too. Instead of kind of taking the corner, people will ignore this little off section, so instead of taking the corner like this, they'll take it like this. Instead of using that extra bit of width to get a little bit better speed, they just stick to the main road instead of going along that outside. But if you go along that outside, you can turn a little bit less at the exit and then get even more exit speed. And that can ultimately help you. It means you have to turn a little bit more, because if you're outside, you have to turn a bit more than if you were, for instance, here to get to the next outside corner. But ultimately, you gain more from going out here than staying here and going there. At least I think. I mean, I might be wrong. I never drove Akina that seriously, but I did drive it fairly seriously. So this is another pretty difficult corner. It's a long corner that gradually tightens, and I hate tightening corners because you have to delay your apex, and delaying an apex can kind of be like fighting instinct sometimes. So his apex is pretty good, honestly. It's actually not that bad. His apex looks pretty good. He didn't turn in too early. It looks like he's doing it pretty well. I don't have much to complain about here. He could have maybe done it a bit faster, like maybe got on the gas a bit sooner. But other than that, it looks clean. It seems clean to me. Okay, we got a slight bit of unnecessary drifting here. It just looked like a bit of slip angle, but then it evolved into a drift. So as soon as you start to countersteer like more than 90-ish degrees, I'd say that's going from slip angle four-wheel drifting to actually drifting. So once you start countersteering like this much, this is more like actually drifting than anything. Nice screenshot, by the way. And if he had just kept it like this and then hit the gas right here without ending up making an actual drift, it could have maybe been a really smooth corner. Like, that was almost a smooth corner. And the other thing is that he could have maybe went like this but then stayed outside to set up for the next one, because when the straights are so short, you can often just hug the inside all the way instead of apexing. That way you can apex the next corner, which has a longer straight, because the longer straight you want the best exit for. Rather than making the exit of that one corner a bit better, you should make the exit of the very long straight afterward better. Because that's going to ultimately take up more of your time. And the more you can shorten that, the more of an impact it'll have than slightly shortening the corner beforehand. But yeah, this was almost good. This was almost good. Almost good. Okay, this is another pretty difficult corner. It's a very long corner. Takes it pretty well. Kind of lifts off near the exit. You could probably lift off a little bit sooner and then put the power down sooner rather than kind of lift off near the exit and end it. But I'm not a professional at this, so I don't really know. He brakes pretty gently here. Might be a specific piece of pavement that locks normally. I wouldn't know because I haven't driven this myself. I might try later. Kind of understeers here. I think he's just going in too fast. Could probably shift into first gear, because I think that hairpins 1 and 3 are a bit tighter than hairpins 2 and 4. Like, let's take a look. Yeah, it seems like the first hairpin's a little bit tighter than the next hairpin. If you look closely, it looks a little bit shorter and a bit tighter. And it seems like 1 and 3 are a bit tighter when 1 and 4 are a bit longer. So you'll want to note that and kind of have a pattern in mind. And I just realized my phone's not plugged in, is about to die. I should probably go ahead and fix that. There we go. Yes, I use an iPhone. Critique me all you want. I don't give a fuck. It's a very old one. I'm not buying iPhone 14s. I think they're dumb. I have a 6S. The last great iPhone. Changed my mind. So we're going into it. Needs to probably brake a bit harder or earlier, or even just downshift. Okay, one thing some people I also see is they don't take full advantage of engine braking. And especially when you're driving with damage turned off and engine damage is not a concern, you can sometimes brake these things from like 4th to 2nd sometimes and they'll be able to take it. What you want to do really is you want to engine brake as hard as you can without making the car just bottom out and start flying some direction, or having like massive tires locking. Because what you'll do is you'll rapidly slow down the driven wheels, so the rear wheels, And depending on drivetrain, this makes a difference. All-wheel drive, generally, engine brakes the best. Front-wheel drive can get understeer from engine braking. All rear-wheel drive can get oversteer from engine braking. But what you want to do is you want to downshift as aggressive as you can. So downshift from like fourth, third, like, you know, from downshift from fourth to third, second, first in like 2 seconds, not 5, 6 seconds. So instead of like, let's see, you know, third, second, first, I would probably have done like wait a bit longer and then like third, second, then first, not third, second, first. Like it's just kind of delaying the downshifts. You want to be like vroom vroom vroom, not vroom vroom vroom. It's not as satisfying to listen to, and it's also kind of slower. Sometimes it can be faster to kind of delay your downshifts a bit, but usually you want to downshift as quick as you can, aggressively, and just be fast about it. Be fast about it. Be as fast with your downshifts as fast as you want to go around the corner, around the track. The pass. The toge. Whatever. So, other than that, I would say it looks like it's okay, just needs to brake in, going a bit slower to make sure it doesn't understeer. He's staying on the brakes a little bit, so he really shouldn't have an issue with understeering involving that. It's just his exit speed. Entry speed, I should say. Probably just that. Kind of starts to turn a lot, so I would probably try to make a slight drift here, so that you don't have to turn more than like 90-ish degrees. Because then you have to take longer to recenter the wheel, sort of. So kind of in the middle at the exit here, that's good, because some people will kind of like, they'll apex it all the way, but the straight's so short, you might just want to not completely do that. You might like want to maybe do, some people do that, some people will kind of do like this. You don't want to turn too far. You don't want to like totally hug the inside all the way, but you don't want to necessarily turn all the way outside, because if you do, you'll have to turn all the way out there, and then immediately you'll need to turn. As soon as you get out there, you'll need to start immediately turning like all the way over here and prepare for the next corner. And then, yeah, I don't really know what to say to that. So this is a longer one. You'll kind of want to late apex these more. The first hairpins, you probably want to just apex them regularly, but the second hairpins, you might want to apex a bit later because they're longer. And also, it seems like the straights between them are a bit longer too. So if you look at this straightaway, and then that one, you can see it extends a little bit further, so the exit speed's even more important. And same thing on the next one, because the next one's kind of short, and the next one after that, it's really long, because that's the end of the fourth hairpin section. Technically 5, but Takumi can't count. So, Takumi can't count. Bro mistakes 4 hairpins for 5, literally. He literally can't count. He's like in high school and he can't count to 5. Like, are you joking? So, right here we have too much grip driving. So, too much desperation to stay on grip can sometimes make you want to avoid drifting when you actually might want to. You don't want to, you know, full lock opposite direction drift, but like maybe 20, 30 degrees countersteer. Like for instance, you're drifting but you're only turning like maybe, let's see, like maybe this much against it. Maybe even less than that. Maybe like this much. Or even just totally straight and the car just kind of glides along in a four-wheel drift, but without the tires squealing. Like it just kind of glides along the track, sort of. If he did that here, around here, a slight glide, and then ends it here and starts hitting the power down around there, probably would end up working. But he turns a lot, almost to full lock at this point, just turning into the corner because he kind of locks, understeers, and then to correct it he's got to turn more. Because he ended up missing the corner and he has to turn more, he has to slow down to be able to turn that much. And then he power oversteers because it's like, oh crap, I didn't make that corner very well. I need to hit the gas sooner so I can make up that lost time. And then when you try to correct that lost time, you just make the problem worse because you add another bit of oversteer or understeer at the exit instead of just accepting the loss, taking the into the corner calmly, and then you end up like overcorrecting yourself, so to speak. So you make a mistake and then you worsen the mistake by trying to correct it, rather than just accepting the mistake and moving on. Sometimes you just have to accept it rather than try to... Like, oftentimes, you could make a mistake, be like, oh crap, I gotta fix this somehow, so I'm gonna take the next corner a bit faster to make up for that. And then when you try to do that, you just completely crash, because you try to get too aggressive, and especially when you already know the limits and try to push them further, you're gonna crash. Like, it's basically guaranteed you're gonna crash. Unless you get really lucky and somehow manage to push your limits just that little bit further, you're gonna crash, completely ruin your run, and any chance of a new record, gone. Gone. That's a better sign. Gone. And so it does kind of help though, because it does set him up for the next corner, but could have probably not had to do that. Could have just turned normally. But he at least ends up facing the outside of the corner as he goes in. Once again, going in slightly too fast, lifting off brakes, not really drifting, like, you know, doing the slip angle drift, micro drift, nano drift, whatever you want to call that technique. And has to turn too much, loses speed, has to get that speed back. And last corner, not that bad actually, not that bad. Hey, that's actually not that bad. Kind of slow, but the line taken was good, but probably could have been taken later. Could probably have late apexed that a bit. Like, he kind of apexes, has to turn a bit, but you could maybe have waited till, like, maybe, let's say, instead of turning in here, turn in like here, and then it might have went more like this instead. In better exit speed, possibly. Oh, and he gets a teeny bit of oversteer at the end here, and slows him down because he has to turn himself back into the outside. And then, yeah, you'll want to drive like this and then head to the outside straight ahead. What is this? Okay, no, what is this? What is going on here? That's the strangest thing I've ever seen. Okay, so we're going straight into it. Looks like he's good, but then he jerks the wheel to the right? Jerks... What? Why would you do this? No, why would you... You're in perfect position, just go straight ahead. Why did he jerk the wheel? Like, I swear that can't be on purpose. That has to be misinput. This has to be misinput. If you did this on purpose, why did you do it? Like, honestly, legitimate question, why did you do that? Because it puts you to the inside, right as you need to be on the outside, going to the inside. You go to the inside way too early. And then when you're on the inside, as the corner begins, you have to really hug the inside. You have to turn more, you have to lose your speed to do that. And then your exit speed suffers as well as your corner speed. That was just stupid. That was just stupid. Like, I'm convinced it's a misinput because look at how quickly he just, like, jerks it. Like, he doesn't even, like, slowly turn then turn back. He quickly jerks it like it was just a misinput. Like his thumb slipped or something on the control stick. Like, that just looked so weird. It has to be a misinput. Because if you're doing this, what is the point of that? Like, just go straight ahead and then apex. But then he jerks it to the inside all of a sudden, like, what the fuck? And then has to hug the inside really hard to be able to make the corner, and then he slows down a ton because of that. And then, ooh, that was kind of good. That was kind of good. See it? This slide oversteer. That slide oversteer right here. Right here. That slight bit of oversteer. If he did that just a little bit more, or a little bit later, he would have probably oversteered right through here and faced the exit and could have powered down. That almost was great. That was almost great. I mean, I'm giving credit where it's due. I could be way more, like, harsh, but I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be nice. Not like I'm desperately trying to not say anything on accident. Like, I'm not always harsh or want to be. But if I wanted to be, I could be. So this is another pretty tricky corner because it's a totally blind corner that also has like a late apex to it, because look at this. Look at the way this, it's almost like a hairpin. Like, from where you're seeing it, it'll look like it's just gonna end, but it actually ends up going around further. You need to stay on the outside a bit, or kind of like drift around it and go like this. Which he kind of does. He kind of does it. Like, it's on the right track, and then right here start powering down. But then he oversteers. Has to correct it, jerks to the outside, has to correct that jerk to the outside, and just barely doesn't hit the guardrail. Barely doesn't hit the guardrail. Yeah, close shave, for real. Really close to not hitting it. Really close to hitting it, I should say. But yeah, you can see how he quickly... This is what really makes it a controller thing, because look at how fast he jerks the wheel. And then corrects it. Like, I don't think I could do that if I was paid $500 to jerk from this to center that fast. Like, even without feedback on, even with the force feedback turned off, I can't turn the wheel back to center that fast. I just can't. It's too fast to turn it. So on a wheel, if you had that happen, you probably couldn't turn it back to neutral that fast, and you'd probably crash. So there are some advantages of the controller, mainly super fast steering speed. So if you have a situation like this, if you're on a wheel, unless you are like literally God hand or something, you probably won't be able to pull this back around. So make sure you don't oversteer that hard. Because this is what I was talking about with the pinwheel effect. This is what I was saying. If you oversteer and then correct it, you have to immediately put it back in neutral, or you'll start just going the other way, and then you fly into the opposite wall. So instead of flying to the inside wall, you just fly to the outside wall instead. That's the pinwheel effect. You have to really make sure you don't oversteer too hard, or if you correct it, there's a good chance you'll just fly the other way. Or you'll start fishtailing, where you go vroom, 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 until you inevitably crash at some point, unless you can somehow pull it back around. But pulling around a fishtail after you've done like 4 different drifts is really hard. Very hard to do that. Even professionally, like, if you fishtail, I would probably just try to stop the car and just slow down, stop it from continuing to spin. But if you, like, at the ice rink have that happen, you're basically done for. Like, you're pretty much done if that happens. So, needed to correct it without turning that far. He could have probably kept this drift if he just didn't correct it that much. Like, if he corrected it enough just to make it go straight rather than outside, he could have probably corrected it and then powered forward and went outside cleanly, right there. I can see it happening. Almost done. Okay, this is one of the fairly easy corners. Ooh, not that bad. Not that bad. You can kind of late apex this a little bit. He drifts a bit, but then he kind of overcorrects it. Has to turn outside some. So if he had maybe kept it going for a moment longer and then corrected, he could have probably faced the exit and then powered down. Like, if he delayed the drift a bit before there and then waited, could have probably pulled it back around. But you're going a bit too fast, and the tires locked a bit, and yeah, I've kind of explained how that all happens by now. And now this is just a boring section. Kind of stays on the inside here rather than going more to the outside. Like, he kind of stays in the middle, which is interesting. And then this is one of the harder corners. It's another, like, blind corner that's really long. And yeah, you kind of, he's taking it about the right way. Like, you kind of want to ride inside, but you might want to stay on the outside a bit long before doing that. And then you'll kind of ride the inside and then power down, like, here, straight ahead. And then another kind of difficult one, it's a long one that tightens. This is the corner where I almost did my best lap and I crashed it. Because I went in a little, what happened is I went in a little too hot, and then I drifted, and then I went in too hard to the inside, hit the guardrail, and bounced off it, went into the grass. Completely wiped out. And I was so close to beating my best lap here, and I totaled it because I went in too hard here. And like a lot of people, you kind of understeer because you think the corner is going to end earlier, like it's not going to go on that long, and then it doesn't happen, and you understeer. You need to stay by the guardrail a bit longer, or drift it to really turn through it, like kind of slip angle, glide around it, drift it, and then right around here you'll want to end it and then power forward. But he stays on 100%. He stays on full grip rather than like on slip angle grip, and then understeers because he's, running out of tire grip. At least he does hit the brakes a bit, but not so hard he completely locks up and plows right ahead. Like, if he had hit the brakes just a little bit harder, he would have probably locked and plowed right into the tree. So good on him for not making that mistake. Alright, he pulls it back around pretty well. Like, he doesn't go too far out there or end up flying over here, so he goes into the next corner with a pretty good line. Ooh, a bit of four-wheel drifting, but he kind of loses it and flies outside. Like, he kind of needed to go a bit closer in here, like he needed to turn a bit more and power forward more to get in there, like kind of pull the car in there. And then he could have powered straight ahead, probably, with a bit of turning to not hit the guardrail. And then right here, ooh! Ooh, that was actually good. That was actually pretty good. Look at that. That slight bit of four-wheel kind of drifting, minimal countersteer, not that much countersteer. He's keeping it under control. Like he's not flying too far outside. He's not losing too much speed. Oh, man. If he just didn't jerk it like that at the end, like if he just did it a little bit more gently, probably could have just dove into the gutter maybe, or at least maybe if he did it a bit later, like if he went a little further outside, and then corrected it, he could have probably went straight ahead here. Oh, that was almost a great corner. That was so close to being really good. Hats off. Okay, and then last one. We get a bit of locking, which is interesting because I've seen him brake around this pressure before and he's not turning that much, but he still locks. So it's possibly just Akina's pavement, or maybe the tire's wearing down. I'm not really sure. Because tire wear isn't that big of a deal when it's only like 5 minutes. Like, usually tire wear is more of a thing when it's like longer than that. I've never really felt the incident where I felt like my tires were weakening. Like, it doesn't feel like I can brake at 100%, then I can only brake at 80 near the end. Like, I've always been able to brake at 100% without anything happening. So, I don't know if it's just the tires of these modded cars or just the way tires work, but they don't seem to really wear down in only 5 minutes. So, it could maybe be heat overheating, but I don't really know. I mean, I wish I could check tires, but Assetto Corsa sucks and they don't work in replays. Now, there might be a modded app that lets you see heat and pressure in replays, but I can't see with the rated one, and I haven't downloaded a mod yet. Which maybe I should just finally do that, because it might be useful in this situation. If there's one that even exists that can do that. I don't know if that actually exists, or if it's just something I thought existed, but I'm wasting time. So, this is also kind of blind corner late apex. You need to kind of wait a little bit before turning in, because you can see it almost is like a hairpin. Like, it kind of tightens up. You have to delay the apex a bit, not just like go in here and then hold it all the way around. That's slow. You want to stay outside, turn in like here more like, and then apex like that. And then that's the last corner. So almost good, but he locks a bit, kind of understeers because of it, can't turn, misses the apex a bit, and then final straightaway. Our time is 5:34, which honestly isn't horrible for original Akina. Like, I mean, if he took 10 seconds off, 5:24 is not even that bad. And taking 10 seconds off of this should be pretty goddamn simple. This car seems like it could do 5:20 or better with just even fairly skilled hands. I could possibly 5:15 this thing. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the limits. I'm just making guesses. I could be totally wrong or I could be totally right. But that's my analysis. You can call me an asshole, but I tried to be as nice as I can, as objectively logical about it, and I hope you learned something. If, you know, you're doing this, or just, I mean, I kind of explained general things, like not necessarily car specific. I just explained it in general because I haven't driven Akina in forever, so long, this version, and I've barely driven Iketani's S13, barely at all. So I know little about it, and I don't remember Akina very well at all. I don't remember like how the corners are taken that much, besides just looking at them. I don't know any patches of road that might be like bad for your brakes, like, you know, bits of road that are poorly paved over and lock your brakes earlier than they would otherwise in other places. But yeah, I hope you might be able to go a couple seconds faster, so by taking this in and listening to it, understanding it, and I tried to explain it as best I could. So other than that, it's just repetition, repetition, repetition. Your muscle memory will automatically correct a lot of these basic mistakes, like slight under and oversteers. And then at that point, it's just the occasional understeer, oversteer. But it's probably going to be way less often and way less strong unless you get like a bad luck moment where you kind of just fluke out. It can happen. It happens to everybody. Happens to me. I've seen it happen to other professionals. I've seen it happen in multiplayer. I've seen it happen to plenty of people. You're gonna crash. There's even Casey has crashed, like more than once. Like the dude has crashed in his prime, like past when he was winning all these races and his Drift King stuff. Like he's crashed.
But let's face it, you'll mess up at the beginning, so learn from your mistakes and don't smash up your car and pay for repairs all the time like I did.
Everyone crashes. It's just how long can you go before you do? And you want to make that as long as you can. And that's what I'll have to say.